So the most fun part about this is this distortion effect. So how do we go about adding this in? So when I move my mouse around the page, we have this being distorted. So this is going to be using a similar kind of idea as what we did in previous projects using distortion. So how do we go about thinking about this? Now I'm only going to do this on one thing at a time. So for now, I'm just going to do this on circles. So if we want to add distortion to the circles, how would we do this? So for each point, they're going to be distorted in a completely different way. So I'm just going to open up my curly brackets for each point on circle. And here what I'm going to do is add two things. I'm going to add a constant called distortion x. And this is going to be equal to 5 for now, just a set number. It's been distorted by 5 each time. And each one needs a distortion y. And this is going to be equal to 5 each time too. And what I can do is add this to the circle. So here I want to add distortion in the x direction. I'm going to add distortion x. And for y, we're going to add distortion y, of course. Why not? So now what we should see is our circles are 5 pixels off the line, and I've kind of just changed the line to a different color so we can see what's going on. So here we can see the yellow circles are always 5 off in a different direction. Now there is one thing that we can actually use as part of P5, which is actually a pretty interesting tool. And if we go into the math section of this, there's a thing called vectors. Now vector basically gives us different tools as part of moving things around the page. And because we're always moving in X and Y, we might want to change this to a vector. Now, again, if you don't know what a vector is, it's just a kind of a direction, is another way of putting it, or a distortion in 2 or more directions. So here what we're going to do is change this a little bit. So instead of it being distortion X and distortion Y, our code is going to break because this X and Y doesn't exist. We're going to have a constant called just distortion. And this is going to be a created vector. And this is going to be 5 across and 5 down. And now, how do we actually use this? So we've added create vector. We can just use this v1, ours is called distortion, dot x. So now instead of distortion x, we can just say distortion dot x and distortion dot y. So why even think about doing this? Why not just keep it as distortion x and distortion y? Well, technically under the hood, point.x and point.y are vectors. They're given to us as vectors. So we're kind of matching this in the same way. So now we'll see it pretty much the same. If we change any of these numbers, for instance, if this is 10, we can actually change this to be a bit further across. So it's actually 5 down, 10 down. Oh, sorry, 5 across and 10 down. So now we've actually got a little bit more control. The issue that we've got is this doesn't kind of count on mouse movement. Instead, we're not actually doing anything with any mouse movement, of course. We're just keeping it as it is. So the next thing we want to do is actually have some mouse movement in here. So for now, what I'm just going to change one of these values to is mouse X to see what happens. So now if we look at mouse X, we'll see if we move around the page, this is exactly the same distance from the edge of our canvas. So my canvas actually starts here, and as I move 100 pixels, it's being shifted by 100 pixels. And I could do the same thing with mouse Y there. So here what I've got is this kind of like floating circle because my mouse X and mouse Y are being added. But of course I don't want it to be based on just mouse X and mouse Y. I want it to be based on mouse X, mouse Y, and where the point actually is. So that's what we're going to talk about in the next video.